when I'm trying to call things out with my team. So if I'm working down the org, I've got frontline managers that report to me at their staff. We've got, team leads and things of that nature. I struggle trying to call things out in a productive way in that sense, because I think I'm being direct and I'm speaking the kind truth and I'm saying, here's where I think we've gone wrong, or here's what I think we need to do. And it works for me in one direction, right? And so I replicate that same behavior and structure of my communications and my delivery. And it cannot be done that way.
Well, super excited to have Taylor Stewart with us today of Sandia National Labs. Taylor and I worked together in the past, and we were actually having a lot of fun as we've been preparing for this podcast. And I'm excited for all of our listeners to see the energy that you bring, the passion that you bring to leadership. And I'm super excited about spending time together. For the audience, you know who I am. I'm the other bald guy. No introduction required. So welcome, Taylor.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here and so happy to see you. It's been too long.
Awesome. Yes, for sure. So, Taylor, you're operating at the intersection of massive scale, and you talked about the size of the team there and, zero fails national security. Tell our listeners a little bit about you, your role, and what you're excited to share.
Sure. So, at this current juncture, like you said, in my leadership and maybe career journey, I'm at Sandia National Laboratories, and we have, I say, a high stakes mission before us, and an incredible team to get it done. And so right now there, my role in the team is I work in facilities. I'm a senior manager that helps to prepare the facilities and the infrastructure required to make sure that we have the capabilities we need to pursue the weapon development that's necessary to keep us safe and to ensure global peace. So it's heavy, right? And so for me, this is the heaviest mission that I've participated in by far. And so exploring that, I come from a background that's has deeper roots in manufacturing, consumer products, production, working with various kind of compositions of staff, with various skill sets across engineering, operations, leadership, and business. So it's been a journey, and I give you sort of that background. And I feel like even now, just 6 years, actually back to Sandia, which is an interesting thing we can unpack later. But still learning and still figuring out where do I fit and where is the highest calling. But that's sort of what the world looks like for me today.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. It's even in the time since we've worked together, it's been 11 years. We were just talking about since we've worked together, and the amount of change and growth that you go through. It's exciting to see the role that you're in. I always knew that Taylor was going to be a really powerful leader for the remainder of her career because of how you show up. So it's really exciting to have you back. Yeah. So let's step back a little bit, back to the start of your career. Where does all this passion come from?
It's a lot of it, I think, for me is inherent. And so I carry this belief, and I think, it's been a good one to debate over throughout my leadership journey of whether or not leadership and sort of the excitement maybe that others feel and see in me and many others carry, how much of that is inherent, how much of that is developed. And so for me, I think there's enough in my core that's inherent. So thinking back to like how I was raised and my core personality traits that have carried me kind of through this. And then the development that I've been so privileged and fortunate to receive along the way has just continued to sharpen it. It's almost like it brings it into focus. So my parents were both big time leaders, both in the community and at work. My sister also is a heavy, very career focused person. And so if you look in sort of my immediate sphere, we all sort of were this career hungry, driven sort of family that then translated, but like deeply caring and heavy with compassion and empathy. And I think those two things combined, you see now most of us in either people leadership type positions or positions where we're directing strategy, vision, decision, and trying to improve things. So I really do have to look back and think a lot of it comes from my family, but I can't forget about all the people along the way, yourself included, who have helped me hone it in, helped me focus. That's and it continues, and it hopefully will continue.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah, you have a very unique sphere. That's awesome. and similar to what you said, I also have a sense of very fortunate. Oftentimes, people, as I share different things that I've been involved with in my career, that fortunate to have worked with strong leaders in challenging situations for strong organizations, and for sure, looking back and working together, that definitely has had an impact on how I show up still today. So you mentioned the tremendous responsibility and the scope of your current role. Huge.
Yeah.
You've always shown a lot of calm under pressure when we were working together. And I mentioned back earlier, you're also great at cracking jokes and keeping things light. And
Levity.
so,
It doesn't pay the bills, unfortunately, but it helps in crisis sometimes.
well, and it does pay the bills
Yeah,
because here you are.
it's true. That's
It's
true.
part of who Taylor is, for sure. So I can only imagine some of the pressures that you're facing in your role today. How do you intentionally bring that spirit to your role?
Yeah. I actually, so it's funny that you pointed out right away. I mean, for me now, I've come to a place where I'm more comfortable. I think owning how humor and the role that that plays in my ability to be successful, to manage crisis, to work with challenging personalities, to attack really challenging goals. It is a big part of it. And I don't think that I always acknowledged it or recognized it, kind of through my journey. I maybe at times thought it was like, an added element to get to know people or to, forge relationships, which it certainly does. But it plays a big role in my ability to attack things in a way that can be tough, prickly, high tense situations. And so I really do try to lean into that. In a thoughtful way now, I think as I'm, again, in this season of my career and my leadership journey, I think I'm trying to let go of some of the self-deprecating elements I used to carry and lean into the elements of goodness that I do bring to the table. And that's certainly one of them. I think the other thing that I still tend to, I hope it continues, excel at is I have always been able to kind of navigate who you can tap into and what other kind of skill sets, or whether it's leadership that needs to be infused in the situation. I'm a people person, like through and through. I don't know if you or others even subscribe to strength finders or things like that, but always get a kick out of folks when they see my results and they see winning others over, that woo element at the very top. I can't kick it. I've taken the exam probably 10 times. It's my number one. So there's this element of I'm addicted to people. Um, I like to bring a softness, even in the hardest of times, through humor to the situation. And I think between those things and then the ability in a crisis to see clearly, like all of a sudden it just, I don't know, my pragmatic side of my personality kicks in. And I think those things both excite me. They keep me kind of energized. That brings the passion. And ultimately, MJ, I'm here to tell you, we're still solving problems. So that's good. So it's still working.
Glad you're doing that,
Yeah.
especially in your role. So
Yeah.
thank you. And I love what you said, that continuing to challenge yourself, continuing, and then realizing, hey, these are actually strengths.
Yeah.
These are things that are differentiating for me, and acknowledging the things that you're really doing well. Is my role in an advisor within Wingspan. Oftentimes, leaders are focused on where am I off track,
Yes.
and how can I do better, and not giving themselves the credit in where they are performing well,
Right.
and realizing that, hey, we're always, there's always room for improvement, and when you're intentional,
Yeah.
and you're mindful of that approach, it is so powerful. And still recognizing that, hey, I'm doing some of these things really well,
Exactly.
and this is what's a differentiating factor for me.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to utilize it to support myself and my team. Love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You're a leader who is willing to speak up first, and go before others, challenge the teams, challenge the status quo. I remember some of the conversations having with leaders where, when we were going through our safety journey at General Mills, that it wasn't there was not everyone was bought in, and so willing to challenge that. When is the time that backfired?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. You know, what I found with me too, where I think I fall down the most, in this is not so much maybe when I'm challenging others either up the organization. I think in that sense, whether it's how I deliver or what I'm doing, that tends to be well received in most instances. I think I've had a couple hiccups like we all do. But what I've really focused on where I'm not as good is when I'm trying to call things out with my team. So if I'm working down the org and I'm I've got frontline managers that report to me at their staff. We've got, team leads and things of that nature. I struggle trying to call things out in a productive way in that sense, because I think I'm being direct and I'm speaking the kind truth and I'm saying, here's where I think we've gone wrong, or here's what I think we need to do. And it works for me in one direction, right? And so I replicate that same behavior and structure of my communications and my delivery. And it cannot be done that way. And I think for whatever reason, even though I've been able to kind of change my communication structure and approach, it's down the org that it's tough. And so I can remember, I mean, oh my gosh, I'm doing a series of things, but in my current assignment, we were up against a fairly large challenge around kind of so I'm also responsible for the lease portfolio for Sandia National Labs. And so we were at a time where that was being challenged. And so, our government partners were saying, this doesn't make sense, this portfolio, and we're concerned about the spending, right? And we're concerned about the utilization of these facilities. All for me, because I'm a manufacturing metrics girly, made total sense. The data will set you free. And for me, it did. And I came back to my team and was like, this is the exact direction we need to head in. Look at what this data is telling us. We're underutilizing these facilities, right? The costs are high. It's a time for us to really lean in, to saving here for Sandia. And that worked going up because that motivated leaders who make decisions at that level. What I failed to recognize is when I brought that same message back to my team and was directed in that way, and I challenged their thinking because they were very protective of that portfolio. That was their life. I mean, that's what they did for Sandia, some of them for 20 years. I failed to recognize the personal elements that were woven in and the fact that even using data to drive decisions was a new thing. And so long-winded here, but that's a time for me that was a lot of learning. The result of that is it took me quite some time to get them aligned to the direction we needed to go in. There was a lot of recovery that had to work during that time with me as their leader. I also had only been in the seat a couple of months. So that was tricky. And so now as I go forward again in this season, I'm realizing that I have maybe gotten to a place leadership has no destination. So we'll see where it takes me next, but I'll keep learning. But my focus right now is, how are my communications and challenges to my team? And am I doing it in a way where people can feel empowered, energized, and charged to take action? Or am I doing it in a way that's shutting them down and feeling like, they're reacting to a direction that's been given? And so for me, that's been my current gap.
Great example. And as you're describing that, a few things pop up in my role now, shifting and stepping into Wingspan as a performance advisor. Some of the things that you were just talking about resonate with many leaders that I support. And what's important is you were explaining when you communicated that up, those costs, those impacts, absolutely, they're important to the organization, to the country, and important to those leaders. And it's important as we consider and we're crafting messages, what's the most important cost to that person? Mm-hmm. What's the thing that's going to influence them? Because even as a leader, you have direct reports, and we're only 100% responsible for ourselves. And so as we're seeking to influence other, continuing to challenge ourselves to craft that message in a way that it is going to resonate, they understand what's important to me, what's going to help me understand this and make that shift. So love that. Going through that exercise and that learning, what's a non-negotiable that you carry into conversations now?
So something for me that's really popped up, and it's, heavy, I think, in my current environment. And it's only because, there's a lot of history at every company, and there's their own culture. And one of the things that we're really trying to work on in my current environment is there's a lot of self-promotion and self-protection. And so one of my non-negotiables in stepping into many of the decisions that we have to make from my seat, because my responsibilities, particularly on the infrastructure side of the house, and trying to determine where investments are made. So lots of money is at play in the decisions that we make. And it becomes deeply personal for people fast, because they want to ensure that their science or their technology is protected into the future. And that maybe it's not called upon right in this moment, So it's hard to accept the, no, not right now. Maybe it's not called upon in this moment, but they know that it's necessary. And so there's all these emotions at play. And so because of that, and because of how deeply we care and the high stakes that I mentioned earlier, that are before us in this organization, it creates this sort of environment where we might see and we might invite actually a lot of self-promotion and self-protection. I need to make sure that I'm seen. I need to make sure that people know what I represent, and I also need to protect what I'm working on. And so one of my non-negotiables with my team that I'm really trying to insert is, how do we call those things out right away? And we can demonstrate the behaviors that are in opposition of that, so that we're operating on behalf of the institution. And so for me, that's certainly one of them. The other one I kind of hit on earlier too, which is really around the data. I'm really trying to lean in with my team on helping leveraging the truth of what we see in the system to empower us, yes, but also leverage, our ability to make decisions quickly and tell the story, to the rest of the laboratory that makes sense. We're a small body of individuals against a 16,000 person organization. And so for me, it's like, I can't have a decision that's made on emotion or opinion. I need to see how we got there. And so it's a tough one, because it's a behavioral kind of non-negotiable that we're really trying to attack, and those are really tricky. And then it's also about deeply understanding, how do we get here and how are we making this recommendation, and I need to make sure that it's there's a basis in truth here.
Yeah, and data for sure is going to help you in those situations. I love that you said behaviors, and how the behaviors exhibited are also something that is truly important. And one thing that we support leaders with at Wingspan is that when you're talking about behaviors, looking for what are those externally observable behaviors that someone is exhibiting.
Yeah.
So if you and I are in the same room, what is Joe showing? Are they asking questions? Are they proactively communicating the challenges that they're facing? Yeah. Now it becomes a more objective situation, especially when you're working with a lot of technical leaders that are not sure of, hey, what does soft skills look like? Yeah. What is behaviors? How do I measure behaviors? Help me out here. That
Time-old question.
Yes. And that's one way to get a more objective look at how people are showing up, is to say, hey, if we're all in the same room, what are the behaviors that person is exhibiting? And then now it becomes a much more objective thing on, this is what we're counting on from a behavioral performance standpoint, and absolutely measuring it similar to the way that you're measuring data.
Yeah. One of the things I've introduced to my team, again, because it's tough, you don't want to enter into a problem to solve and say, I don't want to see any self-promotion or self-protection up in here, never again. So to combat that, to your point about how I want people to show up and what I'm looking for, is one of the things I tell my team is, I'm looking for curiosity, not certainty. Ask questions, be so persistent in your pursuit of curiosity and really deeply understanding the elements, at play here. And let's save the certainty for the very end, of the road here, once we've collected all of these pieces. And so I try to get them focused on that. I mean, even in a conversation yesterday, my team was bringing forward, some options. We're always in the option space of like, which direction are we going to go in? They're bringing forward these options. And I could already tell that we were inserting our own assumptions, our own sort of thinking about what we could see on the surface. And I remember, and even yesterday, I stopped him and said, we have to remember that if we don't enter into this in the most curious, mindset as a team, we will for sure end up at the wrong stop, and everyone kind of got quiet for a moment, because I think that they had felt like they were asking the questions and bringing me the data and let's figure out which way we're going to go, or, the elements of this problem that we're trying to solve. But we weren't. We were in the early stages and we were all already certain. We were, making comments of like, I think this is what's happening, or we keep doing this. And then they start inserting the they, them. And so that's for a separate thing. But curiosity is the way to go.
Love it. I say all the time, the asking more questions is your power tool. So yes. Asking more questions of yourself, of the people that you work with, of your leaders, that curiosity, absolutely. It uncovers new information, new thought, and often new options that you might not have considered. Yeah. We're so used to solving problems as leaders. Yeah. Oftentimes we jump to, oh, I've got it. Hey, this is going to work great for us, without asking and challenging a lot of those questions.
Always. And I'm not sure, how, like I fit this in quite often too, and you probably remember it so heavily. maybe discussed, at General Mills. Procter and Gamble was founded in many ways on this kind of behavioral assumption too, but that curiosity then paired with assuming positive intent, then even the way you're framing your questions, right? Even the way that you're stepping into these conversations to understand and learn, are on the right are in the right trajectory and in the right focus area to really get after the problem. Anyway, the problem you're trying to solve. But that piece of it too is how I like to see people show up so that I don't have self-promotion, self-protection, those things at play, because the work we do is hard enough. um, I mean, I tell my team that all the time. I'm like, the work that we do is hard enough as it is. So to overlay organizational, challenges and tension, to overlay behavioral issues, to insert any other kind of noise into the system, we're just continuing to make it even more challenging for us to deliver here. And so how might we peel those things back and really just embrace the complexity that already is the work, even on its own?
Yeah, love it. It's how do we, instead of us continuing, or hey, here's my thought,
Yes.
you said it's already a very challenging landscape, role, what you're responsible for. How do we come together
Yeah.
and partner in these situations? And that actually there's a lot of strength
Yeah.
in difference of opinions and bringing those different
Oh,
opportunities
absolutely.
to the table, rather than me staking my claim in the ground and hey, I've got it all figured out, because I'm pretty certain that we don't.
We don't, and it's certainly not alone. So yeah, I don't know. I'm working on it. We'll see. I think it tends to get people at least thinking, because quite often it's like the time old tale. It's impossible to see what we are contributing to these situations, but we can certainly see what others are contributing to it. And so it's turning, that mirror around, and then, as a leader, really like to what you said, trying our best to say these are the non-negotiables. Like this is how this team needs to function to be the most successful that we can be and do the most for the organization. But it's always, it's a journey.
It is absolutely a journey. It's awesome if, we talked a little bit about the objective side of behavioral performance and how you might measure it, and then setting some milestones. Hey, how are we doing? We talked about us challenging one another and asking more questions, being curious. What does that look like?
Mhm.
And shining a light on those examples when folks are
Oh,
really doing a great job of it to reinforce that is so important.
yeah. And they can see. So this is what that looks like, and what we're seeking. Um, I mean, I always room, I think, as you say that, I'm reflecting even in my own, um, so much room to do more. I think of that across the organization for sure. And I think oftentimes, at least for me, it's not necessarily that I'm abdicating that duty, but I don't give it enough attention and time as I should. And I sometimes, even, as I'm in my own career progression, I think forget that the weight that sometimes my seat carries versus how I see myself showing up. And so I'm not giving enough of that time to that recognition and reinforcement that is really your winning ticket to sustainment for some of these cultural changes.
So we've talked a lot about your journey here and some of the things that helped shaped you as a person, as a leader, especially in the current state and the large scope of your role.
Yeah.
What pursuits are you most excited about as you look out in the future, maybe the next 12 or 24 months?
Hmm. I think functionally maybe first, so that where there's some big items before us, I'm the most excited about seeing my current team, and maybe others can relate to this, but seeing my current team really unlock, I think, and understand the relationships we have across departments. So what I mean by that is I'm in planning and programming. So I've got a department that does long range planning and is looking out over the horizon. I've got a team that does space planning. So they're in the thick of it. They're in the now. They're how am I moving this person from, point A to point B? What are the strategic kind of moves might we make across the campus? I mean, we like to say that here at Sandia, particularly New Mexico, we're stewarding a small city. We've got over 1,000 assets, so it's quite the challenge, right? So I've got that. I've got a team that works in the financial realm, so they're managing large budgets and deploying investments, kind of as we direct them. And then I mentioned real estate, so I've got all these different functions. And what I'm hoping, as we go forward, we've had some reorgs that we've worked on, like many organizations, trying to figure out what the magic kind of match is on where these functions should go. And I think we're onto something right now with this most recent one. And so my hope is that the team continues to unlock, the fact that these services and functions really connect deeply, and we can make better long range plans if we more deeply understand the near term needs of the organization. So if we're, more keyed into the demand that's before us and what the organization needs, then I feel better about my investments over the next 25 years. You know, if my programming team that's, in charge of this large scale budget is more understanding and deeply connected with the teams that are hearing about this demand and understanding what the capabilities need, then they can start to work scenarios from a financial perspective, right? That serve us into the future. So that is just, right now, my current focus is, can we realize that in time before we iterate again and try something else? So I'm looking forward to that. Um, for me at Sandia, I'm excited about something fairly new to the org. We are exploring more rapid rotations of leaders at my level and above. And so, and maybe even some of our lower level managers too, which could be really exciting. And the goal we have is, can we get to a place where we can deepen and broaden experiences at the right pace and the right scale across the organization, that we ultimately become better, more efficient, right? All these different things. And that's not something that Sandia has done. I mean, in my org, if you came in to explore, you would find people that have been in many cases in those seats for 20, 30 years,
Wow.
long time. Some folks will retire in the same organization that they started. And there's a specific driver for that when you're thinking about science and technology. Maybe I want my team that's really exploring laser technology and advancements to be dedicated to that work. But in other spaces, particularly for leaders, it really benefits us to see this sort of change of scenery. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to what the next chapter of maybe these rotations look like at Sandia. I'm looking forward to the organization leaning into it a bit more broad than maybe just, my particular area, so that these experiences begin to transfer, where, we have this empathy that then is almost invoked naturally. And I think that's going to be big for us in the long run.
What's awesome is that you have a lot of experience with that
Yes.
in your past. And so definitely in some of the organizations that you've worked for, myself as well, where it was intentional
Yeah.
to do rotations, to get exposure to different parts of the organization. So they can tap into Taylor and
Yeah.
you can show them the benefits of what this might bring to the organization. That's
I
really
know.
cool.
I think the shock value never gets old, MJ, when I put up kind of my leadership story and I'm, in pieces of it beginning with some of the different assignments. And it's, something insane, like 11 different assignments over, whatever, 20 years or 18 years now. And everyone's like, it's just so shocking for where we're at now. It's hugely beneficial. So.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. You talked earlier a little bit about that you're on your own career journey as
Yeah.
well, as the whole organization is going through change. What are some of the things that you do, Taylor, to continue to up-level your skills and challenge yourself?
You know, one of the things that is, at least again, like in this particular role too, for me, that's become even more important, but I think I've always really tried to invest in, is you have to have that, now we've called it battle buddy or your peer mentor or that confidant that you have. And I find myself today leaning on that person, that small collection for me of people all the time. I'm running different strategies by them. I'm testing my thinking around development of my staff with them, and my managers and my other leaders. And that has become such a crucial part of my support system and leadership journey. I learn every time I leave those interactions with something I didn't see about myself, with something I didn't recognize or even think about what I was about to do. And those have become incredibly pivotal for me. Um, I never stop learning either. Even this experience, I'm going to take away so much from it, even today, the things you're thinking about, the questions you're asking. So I really try to stay tapped into where are we going, in the philosophies of leadership and what that looks like. And so, I just actually got out of a training this week, that I participated in. So I try to stay sharp and fresh in those ways too. And then the final thing I think that I wish I could do more of, that's maybe part of my goals going forward, is I I want to be more disciplined in my reflection of my own practice. So
Hmm.
what are my practices in my journaling, Never been
Mm.
much of a journaler. We'll see how that goes. But what am I doing? What am I doing within my own practice where I can't find the MJ or I can't find my confidence? So then what am I doing that I can still stay sharp where I'm actually taking those moments? And so it's a great question to ask because we just got out of this, session this week where they had us really think deeply about what this looks like going forward and how we invest in ourselves in the right way. And so those are the things that were top on my list.
Love it. Battle buddy. You were my
Yeah.
battle buddy,
Yes.
and
Same.
someone that I looked up to,
Yeah.
as I was transitioning into a safety role, and
Yeah.
you were the person that had set the way and the direction. It had a tremendous amount of impact on me as a leader. And what I'll offer you, Taylor, is set some goals for yourself that are measurable. I know you're busy. You've got a lot going on. You're not only a high level leader, you're a mom, and you've got so much in your life that those small little, how am I checking in with myself? How many times am I going to do it a week? How am I measuring the great things that I'm doing so that you're able to give yourself some credit? It
Mm-hmm.
is certainly something that will benefit you and benefit all of us when you take that time.
No, you're so right. I think we forget too often that leadership is a practice. So it's just as I would go to the gym, to let's be honest, I'm not going to the gym, but let's think of a different one. No. But just as somebody would go to learn a new skill, it's a practice. It's not going to happen naturally. And
Mm.
I know for certain I take sometimes these things for granted where I forget that I know that it's a journey because it's had a winding road for me already, and lots that I've learned, but I don't always treat it as a practice, to your point, setting goals for it, trying to like incrementally make progress on my own. And if you don't, just like a muscle or what have you, it will atrophy. And I
Yeah.
certainly don't want that. I have to be
Yeah.
wary of that. Hmm.
Yeah. So when you're in the gym tomorrow, just,
Yeah.
jot that down
Yeah.
and that'll be your
Maybe that's
time.
one of my goals too.
Yeah.
Now we've told people too much, but I hear that the gym, that's what happens at the gym.
Hey, awesome. All right. So we're going to jump into a rapid fire round and have a little
Ooh.
bit of fun.
Okay.
So you mentioned New Mexico, and there's not a whole lot of folks that have that connection. So I've got some questions for you.
Yes, I love it.
So, uh, red or green?
Oh, come on, Christmas.
Oh,
Come
okay.
on.
Christmas. All right.
Yes.
All right. I love it. Here's one that's fun. Cereal or granola bars?
Okay, cereal, even though I was the operations manager for bars, deeply loved that, but cereal all day long.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. This one you already answered. I'm still going to ask it. Gut feeling or data driven?
Okay, data driven. Come on, man. But you got the gut is a dangerous thing because even when the data is telling you something, right? I don't know how many my gut will jump up into my head and now I'm thinking about it for days. But yeah, data driven.
Okay. Balloon Fiesta or Santa Fe Plaza?
Ooh, now Santa Fe Plaza. I
Oh,
know,
okay.
I know.
Cool.
In this age, MJ, I'm turning into like landscape mom. I want to see the landscape. I want to see the culture. Balloon Fiesta is a good time though, so don't miss out.
Awesome. And then what's one thing outsiders don't typically understand about New Mexico?
I think it's the depth of our culture and how nice we can be. I think there's a lot that you can see on the surface, right, of some of the challenges that we face here in New Mexico, particularly in Albuquerque. And I get it. The data doesn't look great when you're at that level. But when you come here and you're immersed, you see deep culture, generations of families that have been here. It even gives me chills to think about it, restaurants and traditions that have been here for years and years and years. And there's something really special about that. And the people, as scary as we might seem in some of the numbers, we tend to be so friendly, welcoming, everyone's part of the family, la familia, So I
Mm.
think that's the piece. You got to go below. So in this case, you got to look at the data, but trust your gut.
Oh,
Come
love it.
to New
Look at
Mexico.
that.
Yeah, I know,
Yes.
I know.
Yeah. It's funny now that I live out of state. Me and my kids, we have New Mexico clothes, and we're always talking to people about it. There is something that is so special about the culture there,
Yes.
and so Taylor, it has been so awesome to see you, to have you on the podcast, so everyone to see how you bring your real personality to the leadership and the important role that you have, and how you lead without the BS. So I'm super excited to see you, and really appreciate all that you've shared with us today.
Thank you so much. What a privilege to even be considered, and so good to see you. And honestly, same thing I've said before. I guarantee you all have taken more than from this experience than I've left. But thank you so much.